All right, sorry, I have to recalibrate the amount of time it takes me to get here. Henceforth, I'll always start promptly on time, and anybody who comes late to class will miss the best joke of the hour. Let's see, there's a handout today, and there's going to be more like this, prepared by our TAs. The first guinea pig was Tracy, who is TLL, and she's given the notes that so you can read this in the handout here. And this is just sort of trying to record what went on during the hours so that we can remember it later on. Let's see, the first thing I wanted to show you today was a letter that I received that changed my life. This is I couldn't find it in my own files, although it must be there somewhere, so I asked Bob Floyd if he had a copy of it. He sent me this letter. It was in the fall of '72, and here's the letter. We talked about colons and periods. He says, Dear Don, please quit using so many exclamation points. I can't stand it! Exclamation point, or I guess we say bang, bang. I'm going out of my mind, bang, bang, bang. Don't get alarmed, I'm only kidding, bang, 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 bang. Okay. Now, so, this letter actually had a great effect on me. I mean, I started looking at the art of computer programming, and I had about 2 exclamation points per page or something like that. It's much better to, I mean, you can't, nothing can be that surprising or that impressive. So, what? Unless you're talking about factorial function, that's true. And then, well, actually, that'll come up later today. That's right. The factorial function. There's a mathematical notation that has that has it in it, and then that's part of the formula. So if the sentence ends with n factorial, then you say n factorial period. Unless it's a surprising sentence, which what? N factorial factorial. That's that means something else. Yeah. Okay. So then, Bob also kept another thing on his copy of the thing, which is a letter that I sent in the next April. You can't read the. Congratulations to you and the dean for his fine decision. I hope you will accept, since I think you'll be accomplish great things for our department. Please be our chairman. Sincerely, Don. P.S. If I were allowed to use an exclamation points, I would be more emphatic. Okay. Now. The next thing I wanted to show you is, in fact, that's what I want to spend this week on, is editing drafts and process that things go through. And so I thought, why not take the notes I just got from Tracy on Friday's class and show you what's going to happen between now and the time you get the next handout, which comes out on Wednesday. Okay, so I got this. So I got this in the mail this morning. In fact, it says 10:54 a.m. Is when I guess maybe when I remailed it to Phyllis. When did she mail it to me? 2:47. Oh, Tracy. Why, it's really an honor that you got up early for this class today. Okay, so now, so anyway, so I'm getting this in computer mail, and then I'm passing it to my secretary to put it into text form and everything. And so this is the scribbling that I gave to my secretary to type from, and Phyllis also has the hard copy so that she can. I mean, she has the electronic form of the thing so that she can do this. And so. And then these notes all look as if it's really her saying everything, but then I get to ghostwrite. I get to correct myself when I said something I didn't mean to, or when I can really improve something, make the notes look a little better than the truth. I don't mind doing that. So I added a sentence here about the she's talking about different kinds of things that are acceptable as term papers, and I added user manuals or parts thereof and things like that, anything that falls into et cetera, et cetera. Now, so she's going through this transcript here, and basically I'm experimenting now. When do I want to use single quotes? When do I want to use double quotes? And I haven't quite converged on a solution. But I think when we're talking about parts of sentences that sometimes it's wise to have a distinction, but I haven't. But maybe that's going to be more confusing to a reader than not. I don't know. But I think I'm going to try now to use double quotes for things where we're quoting what somebody said, but single quotes where we're quoting some piece of text as written. So we're playing with that, and so anyway, first I went through this handout, and I told Phyllis I was going to give her a nice macro for this relation here, so that she just had to type \list and so on to get that come out nice, and Tracy has introduced a very nice innovation here. She's going to replace a specific formula with something in brackets that will indicate what sort of the generality of the topic. Okay, now let me see. I added a sentence here. Some papers had more colons than periods. That was just to make a point that didn't come out in the notes. Okay, so I went through and edited that, and then I got Phyllis's output. It looks like this, and then now once I saw it typewritten, all of a sudden I saw a lot of other things that I didn't see in the this typeset rather than typewriter style, and things when they looked typeset didn't look. I wanted to make more changes as I saw this draft. In fact, I guess Winston Churchill and Herbert Hoover, when you got to be that powerful in the 30s, they would never look at anything that was done by a typewriter, but they had somebody actually would typeset it first in the drafts of their speeches, and then they would read it in type first. They gave them and when Hoover died, he was over 80 years old and had 8 secretaries working for him. That's life. Anyway, so anyway, here when I reread this after it was typed, and I decided that handout number 4 didn't look right there, but it'd be better if I said number 4 or something like this. Then here it was the title of handout number 4 had a period in it, but I decided to take the period out when I'm quoting it. Looked a little confusing to have a period in the middle of the sentence there. Here it said the interests of succinct notes, and it looked to me better, interest of succinct notes. But now here's a more specific thing. I have replaced many literal phrases with their generic equivalents. Now, to me, it's better to say you replace something by, and I don't know why. And I didn't have my favorite dictionary on things like that is at home, and so I'm not sure what the usage panel would recommend on this. But to me, replacing something by something else is a little bit better than with something else. I don't know. And I can look it up later. But right now I decided to replace it by the generic equivalents. And I'm putting a quote around relation. It seemed to look a little better. It would look a little naked without it. So it's going to say now, for example, I might have replaced quote A greater than B by quote relation in angle brackets unquote period. Now here I took out a comma that was in front of that because that comma interferes with the fact that you're replacing X by Y. Okay. Now again I took out a comma here. While the colon in comma defined it as follows is fine comma. Now, once I put this in single quotes, I'm talking about defining it as follows as a part of a sentence, and not something that I'm really quoting, but sort of a piece of text that I'm talking about as a piece of text. And so, while a colon in this piece of text is fine, comma, it seems to make more sense to do it that way. But when you're talking about talking, yeah, comment.
Does TeX not have a draft mode that gives you big, wide spaces between the lines for making corrections?
Oh, yes, it does.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
But I didn't tell Phyllis to do that. Yeah, that's right. I could have used some kind of a double spacing feature so that there would be more room here. Yeah, it's confusing, and actually, I think Phyllis sometimes brings a magnifying glass to work in order to follow this. Yeah. So, good point. In fact, now that's another thing. Though that my publisher wants me, when I finish this book, to send them a double-spaced copy of the chapter. But one of the things that's important to the exposition is what faces what on what pages, and so I can't do that without sort of hiding the other aspect of it, which is how the pages look. So maybe I give them both.
Printed on very long paper.
Printed on very long paper. Yeah, we have that 17-inch paper now. I could try that. Okay. Yeah. And then I added a few words, like here at the very bottom, I just added another sentence, avoid the outer parentheses altogether. Now this is a sentence of mine. I changed what Tracy remembered about what I said on Friday because I didn't remember it the same way. So this last part is my own sentence. So I'm correcting that here. Here it says, in some cases your audience may expect nested parentheses. In this case, or in any other when you feel you must have them. I put in the word case there. It seemed better to me this time around, but here we've already used the word case twice. Still, I felt it was okay. In any other case, when you feel you must have them, should the outer pair be changed to brackets or curly braces, and so on. These are the notes for the previous time. Now, here's something. I mean, most of these things that I did then when I marked up Tracy's original was actually just to change the history of what actually went on Friday and improve it to what I thought I should have said and so on. But here was, she mentioned Helmut may have been the fellow to initiate something, and it just shows that I mumble too much. I'm sorry about that. Please don't applaud. Paul Helmusch, the man who also wrote How I Write Mathematics and things like that. I think he's the initiator of this, so I respelled his name. And now here was one thing though where I was a technical point when Tracy wrote, we can't read it very well here. It says, when using a raised ST in phrases such as the I plus first component, she wrote, be careful about the font used. Now that's fine, but that's very common. You find that in manuals and papers all the time. Someone will always say, be careful, but you never tell you which way they have in mind. It's obvious to them which is the right way, but it's better to actually risk saying which one is right and which one is wrong. And in fact, that's one of the characteristics that I find is about my own writing style, that I tend to take risks. I have a chance of making more than 100 mistakes on every page because of the way I write things. I mean, I tend to give concrete examples and facts and things that can be right or wrong instead of talking around the subject, which is much less risky, and you can say a lot of things. I mean, anybody who writes letters of recommendation knows all about how you can be more or less specific, but in my books I try to be specific, something that can actually be right or wrong, so that a person can actually check it later on, and that means that if I have 100 chances on every page to be right or wrong, and if my cumulative average on taking tests through college was only 97%, that means I have 3 errors per page on maybe something like that, and so I have a chance of making errors that way. But I think it's better to take that chance when you're writing something that people are going to be using for reference. Okay, so then so I added the example to set it in Roman, and then I also had another phrase that Phyllis missed because my handwriting was so sloppy, but I wanted to point out that the reason that it's better to put it in Roman is so that it doesn't confuse with being 1 to the ST power, which would be in italic. Okay, now let's see, is there any other comments here? Oh, I don't know. Here's it says, remember to capitalize words. I want to look at the monitor as I'm reading this. Remember to capitalize words like theorem and lemma in titles such as Lemma 1 and Theorem 2. It seems to me here was an example of parallelism where we could improve, words like theorem and lemma, titles like. It was better not to vary the choice of words in there. Here. Oh, I don't understand. This must have been a typo, Tracy, but she said, avoid passive voice. My temptation to write, passive voice is bad, was overwhelming. For example, she says, write, it can be shown rather than a proof shows. So here she's recommending to write passive voice instead of, I think maybe she was giving an example of using passive voice, but I changed it to replace this by, a proof shows anyway, and again, by instead of which, don't know. Let's see, here, one especially easy to read proof. I decided to hyphenate this as to make it clear that it's a compound adjective. It's an easy to read proof rather than a, something can be easy to read, but an easy to read proof, I tend to hyphenate. That's not.
I seem to remember being told in high school that compound adjectives are hyphenated when they are before the noun, but not when they are predicate adjectives. Is that right?
Yes. A proof is easy to read without hyphens, and an easy to read proof is before the noun. But I had to waffle. I mean, I was writing random number generation, a chapter on random number generation, and random number generators, and at points I sometimes hyphenated between random and number, and finally I took them all out. It just didn't look right at all.
I think when it's automatically read as a unit anyway, you don't need the hyphens.
Yeah. But I didn't want somebody to think that I was taking a number generator at random, so I was generating random number, but still, it's better. Okay. Well, now, but I've been spending all this time, these last classes, just criticizing everybody else's writing and so on here. Now, I wanted to show that at least that all of us in this room can get some noticeable benefits by changing the things that we do every day. But I should also be now criticize myself too, and so that's what I want to do the rest of today, and also probably Wednesday, maybe even Friday, by showing you what I was doing to my own writing a couple of weeks ago when I was working on the first draft of a chapter for actually CS 260, which meets Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9 o'clock, and I finished 5 chapters of their text, and they're still going away at full speed, and I have to try to give them chapter 7. I'm going to skip chapter 6 for the time being, so that I'm not in too much pressure. I have it planned in my head, but I'm not going to actually put it through the computer so that I don't fall too far behind. And 7 is a much more important chapter, and it sort of will. The way things break in chapter 7 will also affect some of the sequence that I want to choose in the final chapter 6. So anyway, I'm spending day and night right now writing this book. Meanwhile, teaching this course a little bit. But any deficiencies in this course are due to the fact that I'm really putting most of my time into the book. But the book gives lots of examples of what we're talking about in this class. So I killed 2 birds with 1 stone, and I want to show you now the difference before and after of the manuscript of this book, and the thing from before is the very first print. This is the very first print I got out of the computer. I had typed quite a lot of pages for several days and didn't make any proofs, and then I decided I was going to get them all out and take it home and mark it up in my comfortable chair at home, and decide the way things should do. Now, this book is called Concrete Mathematics, and it's got 3 authors. I'm Oren Patashnik, who's sitting here and smiling in the front row and lends me his watch every day, is the man who did the hardest part of the work. He spent several years preparing a first draft of this book, and then my turn came this summer to go through and make the near final draft. And Ron Graham and I didn't mention Ron. Ron is the 3rd author. He's taught the course twice, and he's at Bell Labs. He comes out quite a lot, and we talk on the phone a lot, and I've been discussing everything I do with him very closely, and he sends me draft sections and things. So there's 3 of us working on this, and but I was, this is my cycle of it that I want to show you here. And the book now went through several stages before it got this far, and I guess I'll say, we started out, and Oren wrote the draft using the LaTeX book style. Then we sent to the publisher, showed them the ideas that we had for the book, and they got a professional designer to send specs as to how the book ought to finally appear. And this is an aspect of books that I should say something about, that a lot of people don't realize the value of a good book design. And I've been very lucky with my publisher over the years to have somebody who makes the decisions that might seem obvious as to how wide the text is going to be, what sizes and styles of type are going to be used and where, and things like that. Now, the strange thing that we wanted to have in this book was a new idea. Well, it's not. I got it from Stanford Publications, but it's a new idea in a math book to include graffiti in the book. This is what we call graffiti, which means comments by the students to be included in the text, to be included in the printed book. And these are the things that the students will, typically it represents the kind of remarks that smart people in the back row would say to each other during class. It's the kind of thing like when Mary Ann says, except when you're using factorial functions, when you're talking about exclamation points, we'd put that in the margin of the book. If I was writing a book on technical writing, it would say something about exclamation points. And in the graffiti in the margin would say, except when you're talking about factorials, you see what I mean? And this came from a wonderful book that Stanford has put out since at least 1970, called Approaching Stanford. And I think they still have it this way. I'm not sure if they have it in the great old style that they used to. But there was in the middle of the pages on that book, you always had the standard thing that you would expect to find from a university. This is the book that gets mailed to freshmen after they've accepted, and it tells you about dormitories and all kinds of things like this. And then in the margins of this book are things that will tell what it really is. And they'll say, like, Stanford dorms are like zoos without keepers. Or, they'll say that the student government is for megalomaniacs and all these various things. So and that was different every year. But they got real students to write their real impressions. Some of them were positive, some of them were negative, but they all came through as being honest. And I thought, wouldn't it be neat to have a math book that would do the same? And so we're going to try to do that with this. And so the book designer took a look and said, it sounds good, but I'd like to put the graffiti, instead of the way they did it in the Stanford publication, in the outer margin. Why not put it in the inner margin? And this sounded a little strange, but actually I look at it in practice, and it seems to work. So this book, when you open it up, it's going to have nice wide pages. There will be a wide outer margin, but there will also be this inner, sort of the gutter of the book as you open it up here. This inner margin is going to have little comments and graffiti. Now, there's not much graffiti now because. It's the job of the students who are now taking 260 to write more of it on here. This is some that's left over from last year's notes that were put in. So another thing that the designer told me is he wanted to have very large numbers for the chapter title. He wanted to be on here. He wanted the first page of a chapter, every right-hand page is supposed to usually have a certain size of numbers here, but at the title page, the number is actually going to go down here. I put this little mark here so that the person who's photographing these sheets later on in the camera was going to line up this page in the proper place. So this is a shadow of where the number ordinarily is, because the cameraman usually has a little slot on his thing. We'll put the thing in there, so that'll help him line it up. I put a copyright notice on all this because we're supposed to protect ourselves, otherwise anybody can rip us off when we reproduce something. As long as we say that it's copyright, then we're protected, I think, is the way I understand the law. Another thing that the book designer said is he'd like to start out every chapter with the, have this line that goes all the way across the page, and he's going to have the, subheads with a certain amount of space before and after. After the subhead, he has this extra wide indentation. But the very beginning, he starts out every paragraph with with something in big letters. Now, this actually imposes a restriction. Some sentences wouldn't work at all if you put the first things in the big letters. Like if I didn't have this, let's take a breather, if it just said the previous chapters, and that would be in big letters, that wouldn't tell you anything about chapter 5. It says that chapter 5 is about the previous chapters. So I needed something, I had to add something to set the theme for the chapter. But the right theme that I wanted to set here was the fact that there's a change of pace coming along, and so I say now we're going. The previous chapters have seen some heavy going and stuff. Now we're going to study binomial coefficients, which turn out to be A, more important in applications, and B, easier to manipulate than those other quantities. And then I'm writing in afterwards. This seems like it would sound better to say then all those other quantities. To me, it sounds a little more informal. I wouldn't go as far as saying then all them other quantities, but I can go this far and give a light flavor to it. I'm trying to give a flavor of enjoying the material as well as, but not, but anything that gets really bad puns or anything like that goes into the margin. Lucky us? Yeah. Take that as you want. There's an exclamation point. What? Yeah. Lucky us. Yeah. He had this. Yeah. This is a.
It's an exclamation.
Yeah, it's an exclamation. Lucky us. Factorial, right? Okay.
What's the purpose of the commas around the B clause and B easier to manipulate?
Oh, A more important and B easier to manipulate than all those other quantities. I don't know. It may be. Maybe to help parse it, but that's another thing that's going to happen is that this is going to go through copy editing after we're done. So we're going to have a professional copy editor look at this, and that's another important service provided by a publisher. In these days of author self-publishing, one must realize that even though even those of us who have written hundreds of thousands of words can still learn from professionals and these things. So maybe it would be better. We'll see. Turn out to be A, more important in applications, and B, easier to manipulate than all those other quantities. It could. What? Take out the A and B. Without that, it was getting too complicated to me. But we'll see. Now, another thing is any writing can be improved. Anything complex in the world can be improved. It amazes me to find out that Tchaikovsky was never happy with his symphonies. Every time he heard them, he wanted to make changes in them, but finally, you have to put something out the door. But the things that various things that other people have done that I really love, I find out that they didn't like them at all. And the same with a large computer program, a beautiful vase or whatever. There's always, if it has enough complexity, there's always some way in which it could be even better. That's sort of an axiom that nothing is optimum. If it's complex, so I'm sure that as I read this and as anyone else reads it, they'll find ways to improve it, and that's a danger I have of going through this because it never converges. Every time I read, I can do something better. Other things jump out at me that don't jump other times, and depends on your mood, on the style of type, as we saw before, that we're reading. And also, there's a certain personal style that must come through. I should say something about style. I forgot to say that before. There's a very nice comment about this. I'll try to remember exactly how he said it. By Dijkstra when he was in his notes on structured programming many years ago, where he was trying to talk about the question of style in programming, and he said that having a style is very important, but he doesn't want to dictate a particular style. He said the concept of style, a good teacher of music or something of musical composition will teach the students how to develop their own style, but not how to mimic his particular style. But he has to have his style, which is definitely him. So we give a lot of rules saying it's better to do this than this, and that might not be right for you. It's just if you feel strongly about it, that's more important than if you're following a rule. These rules are given mostly as guidance to one person's opinion, but your own style is going to be the thing that finally controls. And like my wife and I, when we write our Christmas newsletter every year, well, we finally decided it was impossible for us to say it was by both of us, so we alternate paragraphs. I mean, there's no way that we can both write a paragraph that we would both agree is in the proper style. So there are things that are definitely I can look at and say that sounds like me, and things that say it doesn't sound like me, although I like it anyway. But something like that.
I have a question.
Another question, yeah.
When you say all those other quantities, like there's no of in there. Is that intentionally casual or?
What? All those what?
I would normally say all of those other quantities.
All of those other qualities. Yeah, it's very difficult to say when to put of after all and when not to. And in this case, I would, since I'm being informal, I'm saying all those other, intentionally being a bit casual about there. Yeah. Sometimes sometimes I put in of, on a draft after the word all, and then the next draft I take it out again, and I flip flop. It's not an easy call.
Tom,
Barry.
one thing I'm curious about that you haven't touched on. Style books always tell you, and I think they're right, that the way you get something right is you rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, just for you, about how many drafts do you think you go through before something finally hits the shelf? And whatever you mean by a draft.
I'll show you Oren's original sometime, too. That's coming up. But I wanted to criticize myself first in this thing. But and Oren went through several drafts. But now, typically. Right now, I don't know. I start out. I always compose originally in pencil, and a lot of people find it better to compose at a terminal. I should say something about that. That's something that I found works much better for me. Even if I'm writing a letter to my mother or something, I can compose it better pencil than I can. Although I'm a very good typist, I type faster than I think. I used to work. I went to secretarial school when I was in high school, and I was typing 80 words a minute and stuff. I learned two kinds of shorthand and all kinds of stuff. But for me, that's not the issue. When I'm writing, it seems that the timing at which I actually think of what I'm going to say is almost perfectly matched to my writing speed with pencil. And so there's no synchronization problem. But if I try to type, I'm typing faster than I think, and then I have to stop, and that distracts my thoughts, and so I don't get as good a result. And unless I get to some part of it which is routine, and I can then in my original pencil draft, and I can just write a sort of a scribble and say fill this in ad lib. And I can type that in as I go. Some things I can do, but this is true with writing computer programs and other stuff. And as I said, letters home. Everything I find that my original I can always do better. But that's a matter of my own personal timing, I think. Now, then, like Nilsson is going to be one of the lecturers here. I think he'll dwell on that. But he went through I think 5 or 6 drafts of his chapter on non-monotonic reasoning because he wanted to get the exposition right. And every time and when you put yourself in the frame of mind of writing the exposition for someone who's learning the subject, it's very profitable because you have to think of things in a different way than you do when you're just doing research on the subject. And so these different drafts went through. I had experience presenting several theory, matroid theory, something where I tore up many different ideas, because every time I would get to a certain point, I would see that, yeah, there was a much better way. Tony Hoare had a paper about communicating sequential processes or something like this, and I think he completely revised those algorithms more than a dozen times over a period of 2 years. Okay, now, but those are more exceptional. I think typically I will mostly go through a rough. Well, here I had Oren's first draft, and I think he went through several stages. So I had a very good initial approximation to start with, but I'll typically put something down, and then something will click that'll be a unifying principle that allows me to go back and rewrite and rewrite it from that point of view. And after I have my pencil draft, then I edit it for flow as I'm typing it in, and then I get a piece like this, and then I go through and edit that, and then we'll see what happens to that. And then, as I say, a copy editor goes through. But you see things in different ways on these different passes. Part of it, when you're writing, I know of many computer programs that were greatly improved by the fact that they scrapped everything after 6 months of work and started over completely. In fact, in one case, they suspect it was their boss who came in at night and destroyed all their notes and flowcharts and everything. The boss was Bob Barton at the time. Anybody knows the history. But this was at Burroughs. Probably one of the best compilers ever written was the Algol compiler written at Burroughs about 1960. And everybody came to work after they'd been working hard on this for many months, and the whole thing was lost. They never did find it again. But they in a month they had gotten back to where they were, and they were much happier too with what came out. Okay, I'm not about to throw this away though. I've got no way. Now, among the things that I find in this draft, of course, are typos, and I hope I caught most of them, non-negative integers and so on. My terminal tends to drop letters when FTP is going on at the same time, and so there will be a lot of missed letters here. Now, it says the binomial coefficient has many uses besides this combinatorial interpretation, so we remove some of the restrictions. Here I decided to use future tense. We will remove some of the restrictions. And then I go back to present tense. It's most useful, it turns out, to allow an arbitrary real. I'm quoting Oren here pretty well. I think he'll recognize this as his language here, this part. And so we give the definition of binomial coefficients. And here I put a space in here. Now here is something that I'm not supposed to have to do, but it turned out that this R has a big dot, just matching the dot in the semicolon, and so I'm not above going into them and saying insert a very thin space between those two symbols, just so it won't be distracting to a reader. And it says this emphasizes that binomial coefficients make sense when any real number appears in the and well, look what I put in here. This emphasizes the fact that binomial coefficients make sense when any real number appears. Did I really leave that way after? Now I've got after here, and yeah, it looks better to me. Maybe the copy editor won't like that, but there we go. Put that in. Now, here it says there's no combinatorial interpretation here, but R equals -1 turns out to be an important special case. The non-negative index R equals 1/2 also turns out to be useful. Here I decided to change it to -1/2. Turns out to be much more useful, and I didn't want to. It didn't read right to me at speed, so I changed to not a non-integer index like R equals -1/2 instead of the non-negative index R. So on that can be done, and it's mostly because when I'm reading it at speed, I'm getting. It looked like the original sentence was only referring to one or two cases. I wanted to make the thing a little more general, And so I decided to do this. A reasonable definition is possible, but actual applications are comparatively rare. I think that I messed it up when I edited something Oren wrote there, and it sounds better now to use actually a passive construction there. A reasonable definition can be given, but actual applications are comparatively rare. I think I would do that. Okay, now let's see, anything new here? Before getting to the identities that we will use to tame binomial coefficients, let's take a peek at some small values in Table 5.1. That wasn't necessary to say let's take a peek at some small values. I was first going to put a comma in there, then I decided to leave out the whole, just say let's take a peek at some small values, and then here they are. Then I say the numbers in Table 5.1 form the beginning of Pascal's triangle, named after Blaise Pascal. Without it, and I took out the comma here, it named after Blaise Pascal because he wrote, and so on. It's seen better. And then I have this table in here so we can see the numbers of Pascal's triangle, and I instead put another extra, a little bit of space in there, jazz it up here. I have some bad typos. Oh, here's an interesting zeros. I have a special typeface in this book. The book is actually a book that sort of the spirit of the book is imbued by the wonderful mathematician Leonhard Euler of the 18th century, and a typeface was commissioned by the American Math Society called Euler, and it was designed by Hermann Zapf, probably the greatest typeface designer in the world. And it's never so far been used in mathematical texts. However, it needed some tuning up for the spacing and so on. And I had been promising to do that for years. Well, again, killing two birds with one stone, I realized that here's a book where I could use the Euler typeface, and I could see it in many, many different applications, different kinds of mathematics. Not only that, it was very appropriate because the whole book is about Euler's work. And so I decided that this book will be the one that launches the Euler typeface, and I'm making experiments with it as I go, seeing it in lots of formulas. And then, in order to go with this typeface, it tends to be a little bolder than another. Well, the idea of the face, by the way, is it's supposed to look a bit handwritten, something like a mathematician who had a nice penmanship would actually do when he was doing his his mathematics and he was presenting it. And one of the things that Zapf noticed is that when people actually write a zero, it never really closes perfectly at the top, but it tends to have a point there when it comes together. So the zero in Euler, can we see that on the screen? You see the zero has a bit of a point at the top. But all the numerals in Euler are different from the numerals in my ordinary base text font, and so I have to put this zero in dollar signs inside a text in order to get it as in the mathematics font when I'm talking about zero. The plural of a symbol is something we'll be talking about later in the course. Some people would write zeros without the apostrophe, and some people would put the apostrophe in. And when we have a phrase like when we talk about the 70s, it's a convention that came in the 60s to drop the apostrophe. No, I think the convention came in the 70s. But it's now considered correct when you refer to the 70s to say 70s instead of 70 apostrophe s. But when you're talking about A's and B's in a formula, I think, or you're minding your P's and Q's, you put the apostrophes in there. And when you talk about zeros and ones, right now most journals will put the apostrophe in, except IEEE transactions on information theory, where 99% of their papers are about zeros and ones, and they're used to putting it without the apostrophe in zeros and ones. Well, in this case, I'm putting an apostrophe in there, but I'm saying that the empty entries are actually zeros because of a zero in the numerator, and then I have a typo here, and then I give example. Well, but the thing I wanted to get at here is that if your typeface for numbers is the same as the typeface that you're using for a date, like 1623, then you don't have to put to put this zero in dollar signs as if it's a formula. But in this book, when I'm referring to something that's part of a mathematical zero rather than the number zero in my text, then I have to make that distinction. So that's one of the difficulties, I suppose, of working with Euler in a book, although it made my actual manuscript look more logical. These entries are empty simply to help emphasize the rest of the table, and here I put in a past perfect. These entries have been left blank simply to help emphasize the rest of the table. It seemed to me to read better that way. Okay, now let's see. What are we doing here? Here's something I had trouble with, and I went and I changed it more. I'm sure after I kept typing. Okay. Oh yeah. There's a graffito here. Historical remark, I guess, about binomial coefficients not really being due to Pascal. It interrupted the flow of the paragraph to say too much about Pascal in this paragraph when we're really trying to get people into the idea of the numbers, but I didn't want to give the idea that Pascal invented binomial coefficients. And I have this outlet, a chance every once in a while to write my own little piece of graffiti. So some of these are ghost written by the author. Most of them are going to be due to the students. What? That's right, and I'll try to and I'll try to jazz it up a little bit too, if make it seem more student-like, if I can. Now I'm trying to. Now in this book, people are getting the pattern 1, 3, 6, 10, 15, 21, and so on is occurring, and so people will. So the readers who have read the previous chapters might jump out at them as a pattern, and I would. And I'm trying to say that somehow that triangular numbers are conspicuously present in Pascal's triangle. And then I wanted to say which column are they present in, and this lower subscript is 2 here. And so we're talking about n plus 1 sub 2 is the formula we had for triangular numbers. In other words, I'm trying to as we're introducing a new subject, I'm trying to tie it in with things that we already know from previous chapters. But now I have a problem. I want to refer to this column here, but I can't refer to it as a second column, and the third column doesn't sound like the one for n choose 2. So, if I call it column 2, it just doesn't seem right, because this is, because we just don't talk about column 0 very often. And so I wanted to say the appropriate column, now I change it to n over 2 columns, but what did I finally wind up with? Yep, I finally wound up with a typo. In the n over 2 column table one, I forget to put the word of in there. That's terrible. Okay. All right. Well. So anyway, you're seeing work in progress here. Also is a hard word to place. And the words like I said all. Putting also is a very tricky word, and here I decided to rather say it's also instead of also it's in this particular thing. And now it here this is the last point I'll make today. This sentence here sounded good to me when I wrote it longhand, but it didn't read good when I came in and it said, "There will be good reason to suspect that binomial coefficients lurk nearby," and it didn't. And I thought it would be better here to say, "You will have a clue that binomial coefficients probably lurk nearby." I was hedging a little bit, but then I changed it finally to "We will have a clue that binomial coefficients probably lurk nearby," because finally it didn't look good to be talking about you all of a sudden here. That was a change of style where we had our cooperative dialogues. Okay, what? You can bet it. Yeah. Okay. Well, so I'll show you some other aspects of this on Wednesday.
Okay, we were deriving the basic expression for the current density, J sub x, in the presence of an electric field. In the special case of the Boltzmann equation, where we had spherical equal energy surfaces and could use the relaxation time approximation. Remember, the expression we came up with was a expression that looked like this.